Hey everyone, thanks to the CBA La Paz for having us. My name is Daniel Murillo. I am the EducationUSA Advisor from La Paz City, and I want to welcome Brian Powers. He's the Executive Director of International Education at Emporia State University. We're extremely glad having you here. He visited 3 different cities from our country, Santa Cruz, Cochabamba, and this is his last stop here in La Paz. So welcome, Brian. How do you feel today?
Thank you, Daniel. I feel great. It's been a great trip so far, and yeah, just having a great time. So.
Awesome. Well, in this opportunity, we would like to discuss a couple of the main aspects that involves applying to U.S. universities, the admission process, and probably the requirements, the typical requirements that a U.S. institution might require from all of us when we have the wish to apply to a U.S. university. So just to start, I would like you, if you can comment a little bit about your background, probably where did you study, where did you grow, and also if you can connect all of that and how is this a specific role that you have in Emporia State University, this role of Executive Director of International Education?
Yeah. How much time do we have? Okay. Yeah. So I'm originally from Kansas. Grew up there. I spent most of my life in the state. It's a good spot to be. I've enjoyed living there. Grew up in a really small town. Actually, a population of like 500 people. So very tiny. Very rural. Farming type town. And really, I think my interest in just kind of global affairs or just the world at large, really I kind of attribute to my parents. So even though we were from a small place, right, they made it a point every year to take our family somewhere, right?
Okay.
Go travel, never internationally, but they always wanted to get us somewhere new, within the United States and see a different part of the country and really just kind of come away with a respect and an understanding, of those places. And so that really kind of instilled in me just a desire to explore, and see more places, get outside of our country and be able to do that. So that kind of led me into my university studies. Did my bachelor's degree at Pittsburgh State University, also in Kansas. I studied history and political science there. While I was a student at Pittsburgh State, had my first kind of like true international experience that wasn't like a cruise to Mexico, a non-vacation, type of an experience. I actually got to go to Jordan in the Middle East, and that was just very life altering, for me, because it really opened up my eyes to just seeing the world in a totally different way.
I bet.
And just really came away with a much greater, respect and understanding for, how things operate differently, around the world, and just gave me a much greater, just global perspective, of the world. So that was great. And then went on to my master's program at Kansas State University. Studied international relations with kind of a specific focus on country to country conflict, which was like interesting.
Bilateral type of relationships.
Yeah. That was a really good program. I enjoyed it. It really kind of helped me see sometimes there's never a good answer to some of the struggles that are out there, some of the issues, but it was good. And while I was pursuing my studies, going into education was not really on my radar. That's not kind of what I was thinking with that. I was very much more thinking, I wanted to go work, in diplomacy, right? I wanted to work for, the State Department, be a Foreign Service officer, and kind of go down that path. So that was what I was
the goal.
Was thinking with the studies. Still continued to travel internationally while I was doing that master's program. So went back to the Middle East a couple of times, traveled to Europe a couple of times, and so I was just continuing to get more more global exposure with those travels.
Very useful for your major and your master's.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, what I did my master's thesis on was interesting. I won't go too into the details because it'll bore everyone. But it was I actually focused my thesis on a particular event in Jordan in 1970, and so I had really firsthand experience. I actually got to interview some retired
first-hand resources.
Yeah, like some retired military officers from Jordan, and actually to ask them about the event. So it was really cool to kind of get firsthand, accounts, of some of the things. So that was really neat. Wow. But yeah, so that's kind of where I was heading. I thought with my career. Yeah, so finished my my degree, and as life will do, a girl comes into your situation and kind of changes your plans a little bit. So what is my now wife? We met and kind of started dating, and so I was kind of unwilling at that point to just kind of up and leave, and go do a different track, and so. Kind of did a couple other things for a couple years while we got engaged, we got married.
All right.
Because
diplomacy would take you to different places around the world. Probably.
And I wasn't ruling that out, down the line, but it just wasn't a spot that I was ready to commit to in that moment.
Yeah, I completely understand.
Yeah, so was doing some other stuff work-wise, not really related to any of this. And then we kind of got to the point where we were like we think we're ready to potentially start a family, we were living in Missouri, at the time. We were kind of 5 hours away from our families. We loved living where we lived. We just kind of knew if we were going to start a family, we wanted to be closer to our families, right, for support. So I just started looking for positions back kind of in the Kansas area. It just so happened Emporia State was hiring a position in the international office. Oh, wow. And that was kind of the first time like the educational thing kind of popped into my head. And I was like, I saw that, kind of read the job description, and it was for basically a director of recruitment and admissions for Emporia State.
Yes.
And that really piqued my interest. I was like, oh, that's actually really interesting. I mean, it still
also
has
related to international relations.
Exactly.
International diplomacy between countries as well. In this case, education, precisely, right?
Yep, exactly. And so I saw that opportunity and was like, that's really interesting, and I could see how what I had studied would fit into that, and kind of help me along the way. Thought I had. Well, I mean, I really had no qualifications for the job. I mean, it was one of those where like I just kind of applied on a whim because I was like, this is never going to go anywhere because I've got no experience, in this, anything at all. But somehow got a response back. Did a couple of interviews and somehow landed the position. And so found myself working at Emporia State in international education, starting in just very beginning of 2016. Wow. Was when I started. Had so much to learn from that, but I love learning. I love being able to take on new things and kind of expand my understanding of things, and so that was good. And then worked in that position for about 8 years.
More in the admissions office, right?
Yes, admissions and recruiting.
Admissions and recruiting,
and then the guy who was our dean of international education, he got a position elsewhere and left. And so in that time, they asked me to be the interim and lead the office during that time, which I happily accepted. I was excited to kind of take on a new challenge and have some other things under what I do. And then I guess I did well enough in the interim that they went ahead and gave me the permanent role. And so so now
and probably more related to your degrees and their area of interest that you really had at the time.
Yeah, and it's enjoyable because now I get to do not only inbound students, but now I get to help American students go abroad as well. So I oversee study abroad. We oversee just student support, right? So if any of our international students have anything that they need, if they're struggling with anything, that's we're there to help them with that as well. And so it's been fun, to have those extra things kind of under my purview now, and I mean, I'm still learning a lot, every day, and I'm still trying to improve, what I do. But it's been a fun ride, and I wouldn't trade it, even though it was not necessarily the direction I had planned on or thought I was going to go in. I mean, it's been great.
Great, great. And now that that we are going to that specific topic related to admissions and also international admissions at Emporia State University, I was thinking, what do you think that are when it comes to international admissions precisely, what do you think that U.S. universities look for on a potential candidate? Sometimes students are very concentrated, focused on their degree, also on the transcripts, probably the university transcript or the school transcript, depending on what level of education they want to acquire in the United States. But besides transcripts, besides probably standardized tests, but you can also mention a couple of those things as well if you consider them crucial. But what other aspects beyond those do you consider the universities are looking for?
I'm gonna give you a little bit of a cop-out answer to start with,
Sure.
because what I will say is that every university in the U.S. is a little bit different, right? They're a little bit unique, in the way that they go about their processes, the way that they kind of evaluate candidates. So I would not be able to give concrete, this is what you need to do for every school, type of an answer, because it will vary, by university. But I just think probably some general information that's going to be useful is maybe separating the types of schools that are out there, right? So if you're applying to some of those elite private institutions out there, if you're trying to get into an Ivy League, if you're trying to get into MIT, Duke, Stanford, some of those schools, right? They're going to be looking at, I think, a complete holistic package. A student, you need to be elite in academics, but you also need to be elite in all the stuff outside the classroom. You're going to need to have a great profile. You're going to have great extracurriculars. Participation and leadership within volunteer organizations and just
very strong community engagement.
Exactly. Yeah. So you're going to be looking for a lot of things for those institutions. If you move away from some of those, those more elite institutions, and you're looking at kind of your, just maybe your standard, state, university that's out there, I would say that it's a little bit less, emphasized on maybe that entire package. But you're still going to want to have, a good, profile, across the board.
For sure.
You want to obviously have the best academic, profile that you can present. Good GPA, from your schooling. If you're taking, some of those standardized tests, right, try to get the best score that you can, right? If you can present a great SAT score, that's going to open up a lot of doors for you.
The higher the better, for sure.
Yeah, and especially too, there's the admission aspect, but then there's also the funding, aspect that goes along with it. And I don't want to jump the gun on any other follow-up questions, with that, but those two things, can sometimes be similar, but they can also be different, right?
Absolutely.
And so sometimes the requirements for admission, maybe a little bit, less stringent. The requirements for maybe some of the scholarship funding maybe a little bit more, right?
Absolutely.
So I think just presenting the best profile that you can, and if your GPA is, maybe a little bit, mid-tier, right? If you can supplement that with an excellent, SAT score, that helps, right? Like that's going to help offset, maybe that GPA requirement. Or maybe your academic profile is, just mid-tier, in general. But if you can show, man, I've got all of this extracurricular, experience, and I've done leadership, and I've done, volunteerism, and I've done all of these things, right? Like that can also maybe offset some of those other things. So
like compensation mechanisms inside your profile.
Yeah, and I think to maybe back it up to a higher level, and just kind of give a more general answer. I think most universities are looking for well-rounded students. We want students who are going to be good students, right, and perform well in the classroom, and do well in that aspect. But we also want students who are going to be active, on the campus, be involved in the things that are going on, right? I think most universities, really strive to have a global environment, on the campus, and that can't really be achieved if your international students don't get out there. Right?
Of course,
don't meet
engage
people
as much as you would like to.
Yeah, be involved in clubs, organizations,
For sure.
all of those things, right? So that, in my opinion, is equally as important in what we're looking for in a student as that academic profile. Because we want both. We want good students, but we also want great, just great involvement, for those students.
And that definitely can be challenging for an international student like moving to the United States, a completely different academic system, a completely different culture as well. And sometimes we're extremely focused on, I have to do well on a school and just focus on academics instead of like engaging in all the opportunities that a US institution can give you, because they are like extremely big and they have a lot of resources as well. But sometimes it's difficult to take advantage of those resources if you're just still very centered in your academic aspect, and that's it. Because there are like international clubs, there are a lot of opportunities in sport, in art, in culture, but also you do have resources like the rec center of the university and as well. So do you have any advice on how to balance those type of aspects in one's life, like the academic aspect, but also enjoying and taking advantage of all the great resources that you might have?
So one of the things I think, for the most part, the U.S. is good about is kind of having that, work-life balance. But when it comes to students, that study and non-study balance, right? And I think, there's going to be a good amount of work required for, the classes and the projects and papers and stuff that are a part of that. But I think most people at U.S. universities also understand, hey, students need to have some time to live, right? To breathe a little bit, to be involved and be engaged, in some of these things. And so I think that is a positive, for most places, in the U.S. is that they want that ability, for students to do those things.
For sure.
And so I would just encourage international students, don't overload yourself, when it comes to the academic aspect. I know some people are really focused on, all right, I'm gonna try to take 9 classes this semester, right? And that's just going to be challenging, and you're really not going to have time, to do a lot else. So, pace yourself and allow yourself that ability to go to the rec center, right? To be the vice president of the student club and organization, right? Any of those opportunities. And what that's going to do for you, I think, one, it's going to lend itself to a more enjoyable experience for the student. But don't underestimate the value of some of those out of classroom experiences on your resume, right? So if you could put that you were in a leadership position in a student club and organization, that looks nice on a resume. Like when you're applying for an internship or a job, somebody's going to look at that and be like, oh, okay, they've got leadership experience. They've done this, right? Like that matters. So things like that. Just don't underestimate what the out of classroom experience can do for you.
And now that we're going into extracurriculars as well, a question that I always get whenever I'm presenting Education USA is, what type of extracurricular activities do you consider that are strong, that look good on a resume? And it's difficult to answer that question because there's so many types of extracurricular activities, and there's many people that consider extracurricular just as volunteering, and definitely it's broader than that. There's a lot of things that don't have to have a social benefit necessarily, but you can actually look good on a specific position or earning a type of tournament, for example, related to culture, to dance, to sports. So what I was wondering is if you have some considerations in that area, but besides that as well, there are some people that believe that your extracurriculars have to be related to the field that you want to study and show that, for example, if you want to do some program related to electronics or technology, you participated in a robotics tournament, for example. And so is that true? Do you think that is a recommendation overall? And if besides that you have some comments related to this additional thing of recommending extracurricular to our students?
I don't know if I can give a universal answer on that, because I think every employer is going to be a little bit different in what they're looking for. But I'll say it this way: I don't think it's going to hurt, right? Like if you're studying robotics, right? If you could put on a resume, I participated in a robotics competition and got 5th place, in that. That's not going to hurt, by any means. Like that, they're not going to look at that and just be like, wow, that means nothing, I mean, like that's not going to hurt you. But I would say, generally speaking, right? I think what employers are going to be looking for is, proof of things that are going to relate in the workforce, right?
Oh, okay.
And competing in a robotics competition I don't know, hard to say how much that's actually going to translate, to
Sure.
like an actual job, right?
That's true.
So for me, I would lean more towards things that are leadership based,
Yeah.
right? So if you can, be a part of a club or an organization, and you can be, one of the officers, for that, that shows leadership skills, right? You were able to lead this club and organization, and then, show what you did as part of that leadership, right? You planned this, like you carried out this initiative, those things like that. That shows what you're able to do, as a leader. That translates directly to pretty much any job, right, that you're going to be going into. So leadership, I think, is big. I think also just the ability to, manage tasks, manage projects, right?
Yeah.
So let's say you're not even in a leadership position, but you're in a group or an organization that have to do an event, right?
Yeah.
If you can be on the planning committee, or just the committee that runs that, you can be able to show, like, yes, we planned this event. This is what it was. This is what it took to pull off. That shows that you have the ability to kind of work independently, see what the needs are, and execute, that to pull off a successful event. Things like that
Very practical as well.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Like
hands-on
that
experience.
That translates, to a job, right? Like people want somebody who can come in, evaluate, all right, here's the work, here's what's needed, and then be able to, plan out a plan, of how to achieve success, with that. And so things like that, I would say, are going to carry a little bit more value, for you than just, maybe, again, being in a robotics competition if you're studying robotics. But again, that's not going to hurt.
Definitely it's not going to hurt. Yeah, it's still an interesting activity as well.
Yes.
So you mentioned a couple of things that are very interesting. So, we as international students, as international applicants, we can definitely make mistakes in the process of applying to a U.S. institution, in the process of applying to Emporia State University. So I was thinking, is there some mistakes that you see as a trend, that you see that international students normally make, like a common mistake, because probably of the misconceptions that us as international students have into the process of applying to universities in the U.S.?
Yeah. I mean, the funniest one, which is probably the most common one that we see, is just not getting the names correct
Really?
on the application. So that's kind of our number one step that we do once an application is submitted. We will pull up the student's passport and then compare to the name that they entered on the application. And you'd be surprised at how many times that gets entered incorrectly, and we have to correct it. So, number one, just start by getting your name correct. That's a
great advice.
It's a good first step when you're doing things. What are some of the pitfalls that we see when it comes to applications?
Oh yeah.
I'm gonna go to a graduate,
graduate
specific thing here, just because I feel like there's more areas that you can misstep on a graduate application than on an undergraduate one. One of the bigger ones I see an issue with is the statement of purpose. Essay, for graduate applications. Sure. What you don't want to do on a statement of purpose is basically summarize your resume. All right, you've already submitted your resume.
That's true.
They can see everything that's there. We don't need that now in written essay form, right?
Yeah.
Like use that time, use that space that you have to talk about something else that's not your resume. They can see your resume. Use this space to really highlight what are your motivations, for this. How is this going to benefit you, for your career path and the things that you want to do with your life, right? And write a compelling essay, that shows really why that's going to be a life-changing, opportunity for you. And so that, I think, is a one that I see regularly is a misstep. Is don't summarize your resume with your statement of purpose.
Many people do that, right? Probably it's better to if you want to select a couple of your community or volunteering experiences that are on your resume, but you need to explain them more broadly, the experience, how you feel, and everything about that experience. Probably that's a good idea. Yeah. But that doesn't represent like a summary of the entire thing, right? Yeah. It's just picking.
And that's not solely like an international student thing.
Yeah.
honestly, for a lot of like job applications, in the United States, we'll see a similar thing. We'll ask for a resume, and then we ask for, basically a cover letter, motivation letter, for the position. And a lot of times, I'll open up that letter and I'm like, this is just a recap of your resume and experience. So yeah, give me something else. Give me something that's unique, that's going to stand out, that's going to help you stand out in the minds of the the folks who are reviewing the applications and ultimately making the decisions.
Oh yeah. And well, sometimes for a regular Bolivian student, it's difficult to being able to afford an education in the United States because of the prices. So I know that Emporia offers a wider range of scholarship as well, but if you would like to comment on that, it would be great just to have a broad image of how probably the application process looks, but also the funding application process looks. And you mentioned that probably it's a little bit tougher in some of the requirements. So if you have any advices on that and how an application process normally looks when you are applying also to funding. And if I can add one more question besides that, Emporia is a state university. So if you think that there are some major differences between state universities and non-state universities in terms of funding?
Yeah. Again, this is not going to be universal across the board, but I would say, generally speaking, at state universities that are funded by are partially funded by the states that they're located in, you're not going to find as much need-based aid at places like that, right? Most of the scholarships that you're going to come across are going to be more merit-based, places like that. Whereas private institutions, have much more flexibility, more control over how they use funds, right? So we're restricted, in a lot of ways in how we can use funding because it's coming from our state. Private institutions don't have that, and so a lot of private institutions will have more, need-based, aid available. So I would say that's a big one that you might see, kind of between the two. But when it comes down to it, a lot of times, state universities are also going to start at a lower price point than those private institutions, that's right? True. And so, in the end, by all means, pursue applications at both and see where you can get the better options at. But even with the lack of need-based, aid available at a lot of public institutions, with the scholarships that you can access, that are merit-based, you can still get, a pretty good deal that, in the end, may be better than what you get even with need-based, at a private.
Yeah, that's interesting.
But I always encourage everyone, apply to multiple places, and see what is the best deal that you can get, right? You maybe get this amount at Emporia State, but if you can get a better deal, at this university over here, take that deal. There's no reason not to, right? So take the best deal for you. You got to make the best decision for for your life. In terms of kind of going back to the first part of the question. So for us, like the admission process and then like the scholarship process, do differ slightly, right? So our GPA requirements for admission, are lower than the GPA requirements for scholarship funding. Right? So you can be admitted to the university, with a GPA that's under 3.0. Whereas to qualify for most of the merit, based scholarships that are there, you're going to need at least a 3.0 GPA to qualify for those. Obviously, the better, academic profile, whether it be GPA, test score, something like that, the better profile you have, the more money you can earn.
But also extracurriculars as well.
Yes, it can factor in. So, for instance, like our honors college, for instance, right? They're going to look at both, your academic profile, but they are going to look at that extracurricular, stuff as well. Look at like your leadership experience, things that you've done. So that's one particular area where that would factor in. And then if you do get admitted, to the honors college, then you get guaranteed scholarship funding, that comes with that. So it can vary obviously by the scholarship type, that you're pursuing and the things that you're trying to get. But generally speaking, that the ability to access like the most amount of funds, is going to require more than probably just the general admission requirements to just get into the university.
Okay, great. I think that is extremely useful for the people that are seeing this. So now that we zoom in many aspects of the application process, the requirements, the funding as well, could you give specific advices to people that are currently thinking of applying to a U.S. university or specifically to Emporia State University? Because as you know, probably we're in the period of the year that applications are going to start coming into U.S. universities. Probably during the early decision or early action stages of the process, or even the regular decision as well. So do you have specific advices for those people that are right now currently applying to a U.S. institution?
Yeah, I'll kind of got two things I think I'll hit with that. I mean, one, kind of echoing what I said last night in our our session. Understanding that not all universities are like Harvard and MIT, right?
Yes.
When it comes to the application process, right?
Absolutely.
Because I think that's a big misconception, for a lot of people, is that every U.S. university has an acceptance rate of 6%, right? and that's you have to be the best of the best. You got to beat out all these other applicants, to get in. That's true for some of these elite private institutions, but for many public state universities that are out there, there's really not capacity issues at the university, right? I mean, they would need to take on an additional 10, 15,000 students, in a given year to have capacity issues, right? And so for most international students who are going to be applying, understand if you're applying to a lot of these schools that you're not really competing against other applicants for a spot at the university, right? You're really just competing against the admission requirements to get into the university, right? So if you can meet those admission requirements, you're probably going to be admitted without a lot of issue or hassle, to do that. So I think that's one of the bigger misconceptions I see, is that it's just hard to get accepted, and
it's a big one.
Definitely. Yeah. So again, unless you're applying to some of these elite schools out there that have extremely low acceptance rates, like for the most part, if you're a pretty decent student, you're pretty good shot of being accepted to most places. So I wouldn't lose sleep over that part of the issue.
Great first advice, by the way. I think that is really necessary for the students to hear this.
Yeah. I lost what my second point was. I got too focused on that first one. It came back to me. I would say earlier is always better than later when it comes to just the application process in the U.S., right? And a lot of schools, some schools do obviously the early decision and that type of stuff. A lot of schools don't even have that, and they just have rolling admissions, right? When an application is submitted, they're going to review the application, make the decision, and go, right? There's no just holding on to applications to wait and compare, right?
No specific deadlines and so on.
Yeah, they're gonna process it and go, right? And so with all of the processes required for international students to come to the U.S., having more time on your side is always a good thing, right? You're gonna have more time to apply for some of these other scholarships, right? That are at the university. Yeah. If you get your admission early, now you can start applying for those well in advance and make sure that you're in that pool of candidates to be reviewed for some of these scholarships. Additionally, the visa process, right? Being early, on that is so much better than being late. Because you can get your appointment scheduled. You know when it's going to be. You can do your preparation, for it, and just be ready to go in and nail the interview. Get your visa, and then you're all set, right? And then your focus is just, all right, now I'm just worried on my preparations for arrival. Traveling to the U.S. Doing that. I see.
That also it can be very stressful as well.
Yeah. So there's just a lot to do, and I don't say that's like overwhelm anyone, with it. And by all means, like even if you wait till the deadline to apply, like it's not gonna stop you, from being able to do it. But I've just seen students get very overwhelmed, anxious. Very flustered, with all the stuff that has to be completed, as part of the overall beginning to end process, with that. And so giving yourself more time, is never going to be a bad thing when it comes to doing stuff. Also understanding that you don't have to have if you're, let's say you're in your final year of school, right, and you're applying for a bachelor's program, you don't have to be done with school and have your diploma in order to apply, right? Like you can apply in that last year, right?
That's true.
And schools are going to understand, they're not done yet, but they will be done, by the time school starts, right? That's what matters. So that's another one I see where people are like, well, I'm not finished with my program yet.
I don't have my last transcript.
Yeah, exactly. And that is totally fine, right? I mean, if you think about, in the United States, 90, I don't know, whatever % of applicants in a given year are going to be high school seniors who are still in school, when they apply, right? So that is no problem and no issue. And so apply early. Like that's always a benefit. And yeah.
Great advice. So just to, you know, an international student can be very stressed about the whole overwhelming process of application, but you mentioned something quite important, that is the moving part to the United States to start a new life, basically. So in that sense, I know that, for example, Education USA gives pre-departure orientations in order, like, for the students to be more prepared and to not suffer from this cultural shock that sometimes. But I know that people from Kansas, for example, are very welcoming as well. So I was wondering if you can mention a little bit about the U.S. universities like Emporia. Why do those universities value having international students from around the world? What do you think that those students normally bring to your institutions?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and obviously, the pre-departure, things that Education USA does is great, and would encourage all students to take advantage of that. But most universities are also doing sessions, for their admits and students who are planning to come to help them get prepared and know what they need to do as well. Great. Students who are going, do both, right? Like do the Education USA session, do the sessions with the university, like that's going to help you, in the long run. But why do universities, value having international students? I mean, number one, they're more often than not great students, right?
All right.
They bring an extremely
in terms
strong,
of academics, you say, right?
Yeah, they bring an extremely strong, work ethic, to the university, and they perform, extremely well, right? So if universities are just touting, their graduation rates, or here was our average, GPA across the university this year, right? Like having international students generally is going to help, those numbers. So selfishly speaking, I think that's a motivation. They're great students and they enjoy having them on campus. Beyond the classroom, at least from my personal experience, international students are also, really hard workers, and so having, on-campus jobs, getting a graduate assistant position, right? They work their tails off, right? And they do great work, and it's not a surprise, I think, when you go to a lot of U.S. universities and you see that there's a much higher percentage of international students that hold, on-campus jobs or graduate assistant positions, as compared to like what the percentage of internationals to domestic students is, right? Yeah. And so again, I mean, they're hard workers, and the universities really value that. Finally, I think universities, really want, students to have a global experience, on the campus. I don't think anyone today can sit around and be like, having global connections isn't important. The world is, is getting bigger. It's not shrinking. I mean, like that, no one thinks that. Everyone knows that you need to have some understanding of, different countries, different cultures, the way people from different places of the world think. All of that matters. In today's workforce, in today's world, right? And so preparing students to go out, after graduation, they want students to have some of that already, when they go out there. And international students are the best way, to be able to present that, to their students, right? Study abroad, is great, but a very small percentage, of American students are actually going to study abroad and go to a different country.
I understand.
So having those students from other countries come to the campus and then be able to interact with
that international exposure, right?
Yeah, I mean it's huge, right? But it's also great for international students not only to interact with Americans, but they get to meet international students from all over the rest of the world as well, right? I mean, you can come from Bolivia, and become best friends with a person from Korea, right? So that's like Melly, our student right now, right? So her best friends are from Korea because that's some of the connections that she's made, and that's only going to be a benefit, to her, as she goes forward in life.
Sometimes we suffer from the same issues. We have the same type of, things that we're very worried about in certain process. And how do I register for this or that? So I think that sometimes the international connections between people from two extremely different countries, but are also international students, probably are built on that, on that anxious moment of like, how do I start doing this, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and for me, me personally, kind of going back to that kind of first international experience, that I had, that changed me so profoundly that I want that opportunity for so many other American students, right? Because once you have had that experience, or once you have made that connection and that friendship with somebody from another country, you know, it becomes really hard at that point to, you know, kind of sequester yourself, you know, and be like, oh, well, you know, the United States is the only thing that matters, right? You know, whatever on the rest of the world, you know, like once you've had that experience, it really changes how you view, you know, the world and your place in it, right? And you know, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today if I hadn't had that experience. And so for me, it's kind of a personal thing in terms of I want students to have that same type of experience, that same experience, and open up their worldview, you know, a bit more.
For sure. Well, that's great. Because you are currently doing that in your role. So that is amazing that you make these connections. Okay, well, but I just want to end this podcast here at the CBA. You've been to 3 of our cities, Santa Cruz, Cochabamba, and La Paz, and I wanted to ask you, what did you like it? What are the probably things that you enjoy the most? Probably you want to pinpoint a couple of things, I don't know, related to food, related to tourism, places. So I think that we all would be happy to ask you this.
I mean, I love all 3 cities. It's been a great trip so far. I will say Santa Cruz, you know, is a little bit hotter and more humid than I prefer in terms of weather, but that's okay. We'll forgive it. No, honestly, I mean, regardless of where you are, you know, in Bolivia, I think the number one, you know, thing that makes it great is the people, right? Awesome. People are extremely friendly, you know, very, very kind, very welcoming, and had nothing but just amazing interactions the entire time I've been here, whether it be at universities, at schools, with EducationUSA, at CBA centers, with taxi drivers, right? I mean, everyone is extremely kind and welcoming, and just makes for a great experience. Secondly, the food is fantastic, right? I mean, you can't go wrong. I mean, I always tell everyone, like, if you like meat, right, you like steak, you got to make your way to Bolivia, because the steak is fantastic, and it's so affordable here, right? I mean, I've had a couple steaks on this trip that, I mean, were so good, and in the States would have cost me, I don't know, probably like $60 or $70 for, you know. Right. I think I paid like $12, you know, for it here or something, right? I mean, it was great. I mean, honestly, I had the best picanha steak I've ever had in my life in Santa Cruz. It was absolutely fantastic. So the food's great, the scenery's great. I mean, it's not every day you're just, you know, looking outside and you see a 20,000+ foot mountain, you know, snow-capped, sitting right there. So so I mean, there's nothing bad to say about the
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Brian. I'm going to close this podcast in Spanish. So, muchas gracias por haber visto esta conversación profunda que hemos tenido con Brian. Él es el director ejecutivo de la Oficina Internacional de Educación Internacional de Emporia State University. Hemos repasado diferentes tópicos relacionados a admisiones, funding for international students, scholarships y demás. Entonces creo que nos ha abierto los ojos de esta perspectiva internacional hacia los Estados Unidos. Espero que todos los estudiantes bolivianos sepan apreciar el contenido del podcast. No se olviden que igual EducationUSA es una oficina que brinda apoyo, asesoramiento a postulantes bolivianos y son servicios gratuitos, así que aprovechenlos. Y quería terminar agradeciendo al CBA por el espacio, por el tiempo, por la dedicación y la coordinación del evento. Muchas gracias y esperamos que sigan sintonizando futuras oportunidades en Estados Unidos. Gracias, Brian.
Yeah, thank you.